I was thinking about this because you said, hey, I'm going to ask you some controversial questions. So back when I was around 12, 13 years old, this goes way back. I don't think I've rarely told anybody this. I think I told by somebody at like Landmark Forum this one day, you know.
Welcome back with the Kris Krohn Show. If you've heard of the magazine Selling Power, it's this magazine globally that ranks the most successful sales organizations in the world. And today I'm sitting with one of the top 10 from 2022, 2023. That is Jeremy Miner.
It's an honor to be on here. I was just on with some of your people in the masterclass answering some questions. So let's have some fun. What do you want to talk about?
Well, first of all, you've got a very different approach to selling than other people do. You've been playing the game for the last 20 years. You've done the door-to-door things. You've done a number of other things. You killed it in the direct selling world. I think at one point you were ranked number 45 in the world out of 108 million salespeople.
Yeah, so it was more than grandma just telling me it was good. I actually did pretty good in that industry for sure.
And then you've got this brand new book that comes out. And the reason I want to highlight it, the new model of selling, it's because of this subtitle that says selling to an unsellable generation.
Yeah.
Man, we have the most skeptical generation that we have ever had before. They can smell a sales pitch from a mile away.
Yep.
And more, I think, true in our world today than ever before is people, they love buying, but they really hate being sold.
I agree.
And so for you, just curious, what makes this generation so unsellable?
It's the same thing you said. And I was talking to you about this earlier. Like when you wake up in the morning, everybody watching, listening to this, when you wake up in the morning, what is one of the first things you do besides go to the bathroom? You get on your phone and you what? You get on social media, you start scrolling, you see ads trying to sell you something, right? You go into your kitchen, you turn on the TV to eat breakfast, you see commercials trying to sell you something. You get in your car to go to work or the gym, turn on the radio, you hear radio ads trying to sell you something. You go down the road, there's these billboards, right, trying to sell you something. So you're constantly being sold to all of the time, especially in the last 20 years with the rise of the internet, social media.
Yeah, but I think they've infiltrated one of the safest places. Social media used to be, it was taboo. It's just like, bro, if you're trying to hawk something, like everyone's gonna like kick you off, but it's not even safe there anymore. Like everywhere. Everywhere.
Like one of our clients, I don't know if you know Brandon Kane, so he's the New York Times bestseller of How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. He's a huge marketer. He does all the marketing for like MTV and Taylor Swift and some of the celebrities. But he talks about like, attention spans of people in our day are like, on average, less than 5 seconds.
So it means that everyone's ADHD now.
Squirrel. It's just like a squirrel. So if you can't trigger curiosity, if you can't trigger engagement really quickly, but on the flip side, what most salespeople do is they actually trigger defensive mechanisms in the prospect's brain. So at the moment the prospect starts to feel that you're trying to sell them something. Most of that is based on how you use
their
your
defense
tone.
walls come up.
Yeah, the defensive mechanism, the survival brain's like, oh, salesperson trying to sell me something, and they instant go into fight or flight mode. We're like, oh, not interested, or oh, we already have somebody for that. They don't even know what you're saying. They just react. And so you have to learn how to use your tonality, the questions you use, what you say, how you use your tone to get them to kind of lower their guard so they become open to what you're offering. Because they still have problems, they still have emotional needs, right, that you can solve. So yeah, it's have to learn how to communicate the right way if you want to sell more. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I get sometimes put on the cover of magazines. I was just on like Las Vegas's #1 entrepreneur magazine, and it's like, how do they even really know that? Like, how do they even know that? They're just featuring me. But in your case, for the award, what you got in this magazine, it was based on revenue.
Yeah, you have to. So like we did the thing a long time ago. We started in like 2019, where you're featured in Forbes and you can pay for that. But after a couple years, when we got bigger, we're just like, we don't really want to be in there, because it's that kind of taboo. So with Selling Power magazine and like even Inc. to make the Inc. 5000 list, you have to submit your financials. So like they have to be certified. Your accountant's name has to be on them. So you actually have to tell the truth of your revenues. So Selling Power magazine, they based off 2 criteria. They're based on your company revenue for the year, which you have to prove that, and they base them on your client results. So you literally have to send in like companies and salespeople, and they actually will call some of them and find out what results you got.
So you figured out in the world today a different way to reach the consumer with all the noise, with all the confusion, with all the constant blah blah blah. Selling that people are having choked down their throats.
Yeah.
And you basically developed a different model. I want to get to the model, but what I really want to do now is I want to back up and just kind of figure out how you even got here. Like I want to track your genesis, because people don't achieve extraordinary results on accident.
Sure.
They don't get lucky. They're always motivated by something. And I'm kind of curious, like if you go back and look at the genesis, your story, the making of you, how did this even come about for you? What do you think caused it?
You know, I've always had chips. I always had a chip on my shoulder. Like if somebody said I couldn't do something, I'm like, well, I'll show you. Like I'm pretty reserved, but like internally, I'm like really motivated. Now, I was thinking about this because you said, hey, I'm going to ask you some controversial questions. So back when I was around 12, 13 years old, this goes way back. I don't think I've rarely told anybody this. I think I told by somebody at like Landmark Forum this one day, you know? So this is outside of Landmark Forum. But my stepdad lost his job. We were like a middle-class family, doing okay, right? Lost his job, and he immediately like went on disability. My mom had to go back and be a waitress because she didn't have an education. And we literally were like living on food stamps like 3 or 4 months later from his disability. And I still remember, this is crazy how your childhood affects everything you do. And so I remember going to baseball practice one day. I was pretty good in baseball, later played college baseball. But I went to baseball practice, 12, 13 years old. And I still remember like going from like the Nikes and Adidas cleats, and they couldn't afford them that summer. And they bought me like Walmart cleats. I think it was like Voigt. Do you remember the Voigt cleats? Like a long time ago. And I had
13 is old enough where you're like, well, I don't know.
Yeah,
I want to be
embarrassing.
those,
Yeah,
right?
and I remember my friends like making fun of me, and like I just something like drove me like that day where I was like, I'm never gonna feel like this again. I'm like not kidding. Like this came up in like when I went to you ever been to Landmark Forum?
Yeah, one of his sister companies.
Yeah, so like this is what came up to me. Like everything drives from your childhood. So that thing like triggered a reaction in me that like whatever I did, like I would never feel that way.
So it motivated you.
It motivated me.
It's weird because a lot of people, when they have an experience like that, like I love going back to these inception moments because the memory will either break somebody and cause them to lose confidence, belief in themselves, and they'll basically tell themselves, I'm not good enough, I can't do it, I'll never measure up. But you went a different direction.
Yeah, I was always a person that was like really dedicated to something. Like if I said I'm going to do something, or like if I'm going to play sports, I was really competitive in sports. So like always wanted to be the best, right? So even if there was a kid that was more gifted athletically, I would just like out technique them. I would like stay and hit balls for 2 more hours after everybody did. So eventually I just became better because I put in more time developing the craft of like baseball, or I played football in high school as well. So that thing right there like started that drive. And then when I kind of, when I was 21, I got married very young. I was out here going to school in Utah. I was like I served a mission for the LDS church, and I got home and like, 2 months later, I'm like engaged, getting married. I've got a kid on the way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to go pro. I need to figure out how to make money, and I went to this recruiting meeting for these door-to-door sales companies. This is big out here in Utah. I don't know if it's still the Mecca, but in my day, from like 2000 to 2005, this was like summer programs for pest control, alarms.
Dude, I think it comes from all those LDS Mormon missionaries because it's like you already spent 2 years knocking doors. You spent 2 years facing 10,000 rejections.
Yeah.
It's like, that's like perfect precursor training.
Yeah.
Because if you can sell the message of God, I'm sure you can sell pest control.
No, I look at my life, and probably you look like your life, and everything that's happened to you, both good and bad, got you to where you're at.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, I'm glad this happened because I wouldn't be where I'm at. So I had a kid on the way real quick, had to go get a job. I just gotten about to get married. My roommate came in and he's like, hey, there's this meeting. It's free pizza. You can make all this money in the summer. I'm like, I'm in. So I went to this meeting. There's like 200 people down at the university, and they were up there doing this dog and pony show, and everybody signs up, right? Because it's straight commission. And then they start shipping us out like 3 months later out in the summer. I went to Boise, Idaho.
Jeez.
And my first like month and a half, I really struggled because I had no idea what I was doing. And then I started learning the process and got really, really good, and kind of the rest.
Did you do okay the first summer?
I did, yeah. I sold, back in the day, this was summer like 2000, 2001, I think was my first summer. So I was a junior in college. I think I had like 160 installed accounts. Like back in the day, that was like big.
How much money was that annually for that summer?
Man, I think not that much. I think I made like 70 grand or something. But for 4 months.
But let's be honest, so 70 grand in 4 months, that's better than a lot of first-year sales
for
reps
21-year-old? Well, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
As a 21-year-old, I felt like I was rich. Then the next summer, I made like 3 times that.
Yeah.
And then I got, by my like third summer, I was making like 100 grand a month. Now, you'd only work 4 months out of the year, but you could make 400 grand in a month. Now, I heard the pay scales are like twice as much now. I'm like, geez, what happened? Like after I got in the industry, the pay scales doubled.
That's okay. But, we had Gen Z come along.
Yeah, exactly.
They expect a lot more for a lot less.
But yeah, you imagine like 20 years ago making 400 grand in one summer. You feel like you're the king of Babylon. So yeah, that's kind of where it all got started.
You want the king of like the evil nation.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what Babylon represents.
Well, you know what I mean. But you feel like you're just like invincible. You wasn't,
you can crush it and do anything you set your mind to.
Yeah. So
where'd you go from there?
Yeah. So my last year, I worked for a company called Pinnacle. I have no idea if they're still around. I have no idea, but they were pretty big at that point. And then, full disclosure, I'm not going to give all the terms because it's still kind of secretive, but there was me and another guy that worked for Pinnacle, and we were upset that we didn't get paid all of our back ends for our teams because we had these big teams there, right? Now, as a business owner, now I look at it as like, oh, well, maybe the reason why they didn't pay us because something happened in them financially. I have no idea. But as a rep, I'm like, they're screwing us, right? So the owner of this other company, which is now Vivint, came to us and was like, one of them was like, hey, we'll pay you to, bring over all these guys. And we literally recruited half of the other company.
Wow.
And like Pinnacle was like the biggest company at that point, way bigger than what is now called Vivint. It's called Apex. We brought over installers, technicians, operations, half their sales force. And then they just went like this. And I just got out because I wanted to get a big payday my last summer. And I got out and then I got into the B2B enterprise world.
Wow. Yeah. So that was your start. And how does that link to those Voight? It was just basically, if you tell me I can't do it.
I channeled in my like dedication and commitment to sports into sales. All I did was like,
it was just competitive.
I was just like, I have to be number one. Yeah. So like, I have to outlearn everybody else. So people always ask me like at events, they're like, hey, what's your best advice? Like, how did you make so money as a salesperson? I'm like, well, it's simple. I just outlearned everybody else.
Yeah.
I learned everybody else how to sell. Like I spent more time acquiring the skills that other salespeople just didn't put in the time to acquire.
Now, what's interesting about you is I've had a chance to now take a little bit of a look at some of your sales techniques, tonality, some of the things that you do. It's kind of interesting when you say you outmaneuvered and outlearned everybody else. Like how did you do that?
Man, I just put in the time, So like, my first event, sales training event that I ever went to was by a guy named Brian Tracy. Everybody knows Brian Tracy, right?
Tracy, yeah.
So it was at I think the Salt Lake Convention Center. I don't know if it was called then 20 years ago, but I went to that event. It's right after my first summer, and he said something that really stuck in mind. He said, use your vehicle as a university on wheels. And so like literally that day, I'm turning off the radio. I'm only listening to like sales, persuasion, influence. So from that day forward, like quite literally, like religiously, I still do this. I read or listened to 5 books a month, or it could be 3 books a month and like 2 sales training programs. But I did that, every month, 12 months a year. So you're talking about 60 books or sales training programs a year times the past 24 years.
So you're mastered, bro. You've just gone deep in this game.
Yeah, and I go into and I don't necessarily always learn from sales trainers because I find a lot of their stuff is very transactional. It's just old stuff repeated all the time, like copy and pasted. I'm like, this guy's even sold for 20 years. The game is completely different. This would even work. So I'll go to like body language experts. I hired a tonality coach in Hollywood that trains some of the greatest people you see on movies and TVs to teach me tonality, to teach me how to use my facial expressions to like elicit different emotions in a prospect. So I went really deep in human behavior, human psychology. That's what I went to school for. So I'm always wondering to know like, how does a person tick? What causes them to do this compared to do that? What causes a person to, get into drugs and ruin their life compared to being an angel? Like what's going on in their mind? So I'm all about that's all I do. That's all I listen to. That's all I crave. I'm a sponge. I just thirst knowledge.
So I'm just totally curious. So I just got to ask some of these questions. So for me, my sales background and history for the last 20 years, I've got currently a sales team of 40 reps. That take all of my influencer brand leads, and we got real estate programs and a variety of different things. And so I'll come in. I was a corporate trainer actually while I was at Brigham Young University, right? Same valley as you. And I was a corporate trainer for this telephone sales company that had 100+ reps that were just outbounding for some of the major gurus and big names, including Donald Trump with Trump University and Robert Kiyosaki and some of the other knowns.
I think I knew who you worked with.
And so it was interesting as I actually was a corporate trainer for a number of years and got good enough at that game. And it's strange that today I live in a world where I actually have a sales team that does, something similar just for me. And when I kind of take a look at how my skills have evolved through time, a lot of it is based on Myers-Briggs personality tests. And I'm kind of curious of some of what you teach, because you talk a lot about tonality, but I'm kind of curious, do you find yourself personality codifying people, like looking at, their energy types and looking at, like you got warriors and healers, right? One's super emotional and the other one is, super type A. And the type A's, if you get in a pissing match, you're going to lose the sale. And so
Yeah.
it's just like, how do I assert certain levels
Yeah.
of authority?
Yeah.
So you can get in all these personalities.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious if some of that plays into what you teach.
I did in a sense. However, that's really hard to duplicate. Like if you come in and train a sales team, try to like figure out how to read personalities, it's just not duplicatable.
It's too deep.
It's too deep. It's so deep that it's like so interesting that you're going to have one or two that will pick it up. But for the most part,
Most of them aren't going to get it.
they're not going to get it.
So you had to come up with something simpler that was still effective.
Way simpler. And you got to train. It's not just here's what you say. It's the why behind it, like the psychology behind it. Like if I can train a sales organization, why I'm asking these type of questions, what's the psychology going on in their mind, and why I'm doing it, and how I'm like getting them to disarm themselves, how I'm getting them to let their guard down, how I'm using my tone, and why this, like what this causes on in their brain, it's easier for them to conceptualize rather than me just saying, hey, say this, or ask this question by giving them a script, because then they're not flexible with their script, right? So as we all know, prospects rarely stay on script, right? They always go off script. It never ends up like the role play. They say different things, ask different questions. So I have to understand the psychology behind each part of that conversation and where to take it and be flexible with changing my next question based off the answer that prospect just gave me. And if I understand that, selling is really easy. So that's what we train.
Do you think that salespeople, like you've got people that are quick-witted, and then you got people that are a little bit slow and they're overthinkers?
Yeah.
Can you train an overthinker who can't maybe function real time, witty and fast to respond? Do you think that overthinkers actually can be good salespeople?
You're talking about like introverts?
No, just people that are slow to respond. They like take time to think and process.
It depends.
Because I hate that awkward gap.
Yeah.
You're in the sales conversation, and it's like, if I want it to be like really natural, we're connecting, we're talking to each other, and you say something, and I'm like, shoot, you burned 1.5 seconds, and then you didn't have a fast enough follow-up.
It depends on the context. It depends on your industry. Like if you're door to door or you're cold calling, you got to be extremely fast and quick-witted. Otherwise, it's over.
There.
But if I'm selling high-level enterprise and I'm meeting
Face-to-face.
6 decision makers on Zoom or
Then it doesn't
face-to-face,
matter.
I can be a little bit slower with my reaction. That's why when salespeople always ask me when they're young, where should I start in sales? I'm like, always start cold calling for companies like B2B, like SDRs, or door-to-door. Because if you can learn how to be quick-witted, because you have to be very fast because a lot's going on in the prospect's brain. If you learn that, then when you get into higher level sales, it's almost like the Matrix. Like bullets come at you and you're like, that's so slow. Like, what's going on? Because I went from door-to-door to enterprise. I'm like, this is so easy. Like, it's like, I don't really have to react, But it depends on the context. They might ask a question. And I might purposely wait 2 seconds and look up and be like, I'm not understanding. What did you mean by that? It depends on the context. I might actually stop that and pause 1 or 2 seconds. But I want it to be a natural conversation. Now, how do I make it a natural conversation? Because a lot of salespeople are like, oh, don't use a script. Totally agree. However, if I'm a Hollywood actor or actress, everything you watch me on that movie is 100% scripted, right? But does it sound scripted? No. Because they've memorized their lines and they know how to use their tonality and body language and be fluid with those lines, okay? So salespeople, you have to do that as well. You have to memorize your lines, okay? And be flexible with those. Because if I'm in a natural conversation, I don't want to wing it, because winging it is not a strategy to win. Because you'll have some weeks you're up, some weeks you're down, because you're just winging it. You're like emotional all the time. And if you're winging it, you're just going to be up and down. There's nothing steady. You're never going to go like this. You're just going to go up and down and up and down. You're going to struggle. So when I'm having a conversation, I want to use what are called verbal cues that actually bridge from question to question and make it sound natural. So as we're talking, I'm like, what happened? I mean, what actually happened then? Okay. Oh, and when did you go? See, those are verbal cues that help me bridge from question to question where it sounds so natural that your guard goes down. But what most salespeople do is they ask a question, you're right, they listen, and then they're like, okay, cool, gotcha, let me ask you. And you're like, it sounds awkward. It sounds like a sales
it doesn't feel like
question.
we're really actually conversing. It doesn't feel natural.
Sounds like an interrogation. So you're like, hey, enough with the questions. Can you just tell me how much it's going to cost to type? I'm interested. See, that's a triggered reaction that they just triggered based on how they're communicating with you.
So I've got this question. I think it's going to be a very ugly question.
Okay, hit me up.
How does you're training human beings how to basically have sales conversations to basically optimize their outcome?
Yeah.
But how do you rectify that against the fact that it feels like fabricated? It doesn't feel genuine. It doesn't really feel authentic, because it's like, well, you suck at sales. I want you to be good at sales, so I'm going to train you how to be good at sales. And someone might accuse you and say, that's just manipulation. You're just manipulating You're using tone and body language
Yeah.
and certain language and often reverse psychology. You're just trying to manipulate an outcome out of people. Like, how do you square that?
I view selling differently than most people. Like if there's nothing sold, there's no economy. There's no such thing as a society we live in.
Sure.
But I think people in society view salespeople at a lower status based on the way they communicate, right? The hardcore, pushy, high pressure sales, right? So the problem with a person thinking like, oh, I'm manipulating them if I'm using my tonality to get them to let their guard down, I view the prospect as they have problems, right? And or emotional needs, okay? Can I solve those problems? Yes. If I don't help them open up to me emotionally, they don't feel any need to change. And if they don't feel any need to change, their problems stay the same. They stay in the status quo, and there's consequences for them. So I look at it as like, if I don't learn how to communicate that way, I'm actually hurting them by not solving their problems and getting them where they want to be. That's just I view selling different. I actually view selling as like, I'm helping the person or the company solve problems and get where they want to be. If you view selling as like, I'm just trying to make money, then yeah, you'd be like, oh, he's just trying to
It's
manipulate.
not even just money, it's just the game of influence. You know, influence is a really bizarre game because there are some people that will wield their influence, I think, to take advantage of people. Like that same skill
Good
set.
or bad.
Yeah,
but
good or bad.
if you really view influence, like influence has been around before this world was even here, right? Have you ever read like the book of Revelations? Any holy text you read, like the Quran will talk about this, the Torah, the New Testament, it talks about the Old Testament talks about there was a war in heaven. Remember the war in heaven, right? LDS talks about in Doctrine and Covenants. There's a war in heaven. Third of the host of heaven fell, became Satan and his angels. Blah 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 blah. Does anybody ever talk about what the war of heaven was fought with, though? Because was the war of heaven fought with guns, tanks, bullets, swords? No. It was a war of influence. Words. It was a war of persuasion. Yeah. It was a war of words. And with everybody living on this planet was influenced or persuaded to actually be here. So, like, to me, persuasion influence has a much more spiritual meaning to me than just like I'm trying to make money.
Yeah, I get it. So it's kind of interesting. I look at a strategy because as a business owner, and we buy a lot of businesses. Yeah. And the way that we communicate with our employees and all of our teammates and strategic partners and our customers. Yeah. There's strategy behind it.
Imagine if you were bad at that. Yeah. You might not be here, right?
I wouldn't
communication
be here.
is
I know.
everything.
I actually know which failures, caused me to learn valuable lessons to kind of figure it out. So there's a great strategy in the game. So it's your mission and purpose then to what then?
So 7th level, our core mission is to change the way sales is perceived in society. Because salespeople should be viewed at a much higher status than they are, because if nothing is sold, there is no economy, hence there is no such thing as society. So we are flipping that game where salespeople, because we're changing the way they communicate, which causes prospects to open up and actually thank you for you allowing them to pay you to get them where they want to be. So our whole core mission is to change the way sales are perceived in society.
Wow, interesting, because I tried when I was on my last program with him, like, just for fun, I'm going to put Jeremy in a sticky spot. I'm like, sell me your services. And immediately you were already turning it back to elevate your status so that I couldn't be sold. And it was this game of like, who's chasing whose territory do I find myself in? And I enjoyed that. Yeah, how quickly it happened was really amazing.
If we're a sales training company that trains companies and salespeople to do that, we would probably have to do that ourselves.
I know.
Because I love people in the DMs. Every once in a while, I get in the DMs every once in a while because I'm just bored. I'm just sitting there like, going off, and I'll just get in the DMs, and I'll tell the person like, hey, let me respond to this guy, and they'll be like, well, they'll be like, hey, just tell me how much the prices is of your programs. And I'm like, do you ever get prospects ask you what your price is before you even have a conversation? What do you say to them? And they're like, and I'm just like, we can show you the prices, but what type of sales training company would we be if we just showed you our prices, and then would you want us to train you just to give your prices before you build any gap where they have any value of what you're doing? Probably not. So what do you want us to do? So I just love getting that angle. I love just, being sarcastic sometimes with people.
No, it's fun. Yeah. No, it's fun. I enjoy it. So I'm curious, like, you look at where you're at today, you have this huge moment of recognition in 22, 23, based on revenue, client experience. Mm-hmm. So it's a really, beautiful award and recognition that you received. Yeah. Like, what's your goal from here? Like, where are you going? What are you heading for? Are you building your company to exit? Are you looking for bigger strategic partnerships and alliances? Like, what's your next?
I'll reveal as much as I can too, because I've got shareholders and a board. Some of it is, we kind of keep on the back burner. But what we're doing as a sales training company, so we're ranked third revenue-wise in the United States now. There's a couple companies ahead of us. One started in 1971, so they got a few years on us. The other one started in 1989. We started in 2019, late 2018, 2019. So we're catching up to those, okay? In 2025, we have laid the foundation for the first 5.5 years of a company. We have a big email list of salespeople. I think we're getting up to maybe around 2 million salespeople on our email list. We've got close to about 2.5, 3 million social media followers, and we're growing that all the time. Real followers, like we've always been approached like, oh, we could grow your IG to 6 billion, and we look into it and they're like, but most of those are fake. Like we want salespeople to follow us and entrepreneurs and coaches. Like I'd rather have a smaller social media, but like real people that want our stuff, right? Rather than like a 18-year-old kid that's in, crypto or something that's not even looking for something. So what we're doing is we're building the foundation, and Q2 or Q3 of 2025, we're launching a staffing and placement part of our company 7th level, because we already have hundreds of companies that literally post in our Facebook groups looking for certified, trained salespeople in their industry from our methodology.
That's actually really big, because that's hard to come by. I mean, I'm always hiring salespeople. I'll probably hire probably 150, 200 people this year.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's always the game of like, how do I find quote unquote good salespeople?
Yeah, exactly. So they come to us, and we don't have anything to monetize that yet. Now, we as a company, we're always looking out more for our brand and client results rather than making more money. We could probably double our revenue now. We could do placement now, but we wouldn't have the foundation, the right people in place to run that organization, because we don't want somebody to have a bad experience and they complain and now our brand is hurt or something. We want to be a company that's here in 25 years. Even when I'm not here, we want it to still happen. So we're going to launch a recruiting and staffing agency. We'll start with all those assets, and that's where we plan really to scale to, because there's no sales training company in the United States that's ever done more than 100 million in 1 year if they only do sales training. It's a limited space, right? You don't have billion-dollar companies that do that. But staffing, we'll always do the recruiting because that feeds the machine. A sales training company always feeds the machine. And then you look at some of the biggest staffing and recruiting agencies in the world, they're doing anywhere from 5 to 15 billion a year in revenue. So that's where our organization is going for sure. It'll take us a few years, but we're going there.
Entrepreneurs get burned out.
Yeah.
They feel like they get to that point where it's like, I've made my contribution in this company, this organization, I've done everything I can, and I'm bored. I'm literally not learning anything new. Years ago, I got to a place, it was like 10 years ago, where I'd already transacted $1 billion in real estate and was not learning anything new, because we had really figured out the game, knew the ins and outs of it. I had mechanized it, I had scaled it. To this day, I have people that run it for me.
Yeah.
And the ROIs that we're producing are crazy. We're averaging 34% a year on our money on the properties that we're doing. Like that's
crazy.
Money,
I'm listening to it over here a minute ago. I'm like, how do I join that mastermind?
Yeah, money doubles every other year. It's really, really cool. And yet it's totally passive.
Yeah.
But when I got bored, I had to find a new game.
Yeah.
Because there are those that found companies that basically help get the party started, and then there are those that are your implementers and executors that want to bring it all the way to the end and say, oh, now we're 95% efficient, we're 98% efficient. Who do you think you are, and where do you think you are in that game?
To me, sales training firm, I'll never sell all of it, because I actually really love what I do. Like I will do this till the day that I'm here on this planet, right?
You'll be Zig Ziglar,
I don't know.
90 years old with your shaky voice saying, I could still school you young pups.
Who knows? Who knows? But I love the ball game. Like I would get bored. Like to me, like, I have some real estate on the side, nothing like you guys do, but I have some investing and stuff like that. But I just love training salespeople. I love the ball game. I love figuring out new industries.
So you're learning more.
Things. I'm always learning. Like I'm a sponge.
You're always learning, and your thirst isn't quenched.
We always shift our sales. Like we have one virtual training course that when we first recorded it was one of our first products back in 2018. It was 8 hours. That same course is like 57 now. And sometimes I'll go back in and tweak stuff, because I'll like, you know what? Like
57 what?
57 hours long.
God,
just
so
one virtual training course.
You just added to it.
We add stuff, and sometimes we take stuff out and we tweak it. Because I'll be like, in 2020, I recorded this, but it actually would be better if I used more of a familiar tone than a curious tone. So we'll go back and do it. We're always trying to optimize to get the highest freaking results for our clients. Always. So I love doing that kind of stuff. Now, maybe down the road we sell a part of the company. I'm not sure. Maybe the recruiting staffing agency, we sell some of that. I'm not sure. We'll just see where we're at, in a few years.
If someone wants to learn
option
more
to have.
about your company, your book, your book's available in Barnes and Nobles and Amazon and online everywhere.
Yeah.
The new model of selling to an unsellable generation. And then how do they find you online? Like, let's just say someone actually was interested in approaching the services of your company.
Yeah, just have them follow me on my IG account. Jeremy Lee Miner.
Jeremy Lee
M-I-N-E-R.
Miner?
Yeah, Jeremy Lee Miner, M-I-N-E-R, not O-R-E-R. Just have a verified account. We have about 700 followers on that one. Have them follow me on there. Have them DM me a message, and somebody on my team will message them back underneath my account, and they can meet with one of our account managers to go through different training programs we have for their industry.
So when you look at your next today, it's just literally, Kris, I got this company. We're in a great spot. We're competing globally, but we want to get bigger. We want to do it better, and we want to expand.
Better and bigger. To me, if we get better, we get bigger. If you get better, I don't know if it was Steve Martin that said that famous saying, like, become so good that they can't ignore you. But that's how I've lived my life. Like when I came to school here in Utah, I'm from Missouri. I didn't know anybody here. I came here like after mission, I had no friends. I got into that company. It was very cliquish. The top people were hanging out, and I was at the very bottom. But I had to, I started selling, and all of a sudden I was at the top, and they just couldn't ignore it anymore. Like if you become so great at your craft, people can't ignore you. And so I always live my life that way. If I become really great at my craft, like one of the best, people just come.
Malcolm Gladwell says that to master anything, you need your 10,000 hours, right?
Yeah, or
and
more.
It sounds like you've paid that several times over, just going for a higher level of mastery.
I actually like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the boring dude,
When you're working with an organ, it's not boring at all, man. It's actually very fascinating when people say, this is my thing, and I'm going to.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that if you are in the top 1%, automatically people assume that, hey, you're probably doing really well for yourself financially.
Yeah.
But here's what they don't understand: when you get into the 0.01% or the 0.001%.
Yeah.
When you start moving yourself to the place where you're now like one of the top individuals on the planet, there is an exponential reward. Like it's completely disproportionate.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening to this, like my advice is whatever you're doing, there's so many people that are not approaching it with mastery. They're like doing the typical 80-20 rules, like, 20% of the people get 80% of the reward. I'm like, but do you know what happens to the top 1%? I want to be in the top 0.0001% of my game that I'm playing.
Yeah, they don't, like I said, salespeople always ask me a big question. They say, how do I gain more confidence in selling? And I'm like, that's an interesting question because it's easy. Like if you want more confidence, you just have to acquire a higher skill level. Like your confidence level will always come down to where your skill level is, right? Like if you want to have confidence as a real estate investor, your confidence is always going to depend on what?
Yeah.
Your knowledge and skill level. Like nothing more, nothing less. Like you can get pumped up and go through a lot of personal development stuff, which I love, and you get high confidence. But if your skill level's down here,
doesn't matter.
Your confidence level will come back down, especially in sales. You'll get crushed. Confidence level will always go back down.
They kind of go hand in hand, don't they? It's like on the one hand, you need to develop a really strong mindset so that you can take the rejections and you can kind of stay in the game. But if you're not increasing your skill set and talent level at the same time,
you get burned out.
Yeah, you get burned out. They really have to move together.
Why is sales the number one highest attrition in any profession? Because of the way salespeople communicate. They get burned out. People can't just take the thick skin and face rejection all day long. The average human being is not built to want to be rejected. So if I acquire a higher skill level and my rejection goes way down because I'm selling way more, by default, I have more confidence. I'm more motivated because I'm selling more. Like if you're out selling every day and you're really successful and you're like one of the best, your confidence level can't be low. It's high because your skill level is high.
It's interesting. So I was training my sales team this morning.
Yeah.
And we're always having this debate of how much of it is just a numbers game, which is just, dude, you have to put in the reps.
Yeah.
There's no building muscle by not going to the gym. When you go to the gym, there's no 3 magical lefts that will give you an amazing physique.
Yeah.
You have to put in a certain amount of reps.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and what I really stress is, you've got what are you doing every day to increase your skill set? Because if your skill set stays the same and you put in the reps,
it will be a numbers game.
Yeah, you're gonna produce the same results you have in the past.
Yeah.
The goal to get more results is you actually have to increase your talent density.
Yeah. So when when I do group trainings for like our individual clients, we'll have a group training on there. It'll be a couple thousand, and I'm like, what are you listening to in your car while you're driving down the road?
Yeah.
Are you listening to AC/DC or Taylor Swift or your greatest rap song? Like, how much money is that making you every month? Oh, zero. Listen to Fox News or, CNN political talk shows all the time. How much money is that making you? Zero. So why don't you just take 10 minutes here, 10 minutes to the chiropractor, 5 minutes to the gym, 8 minutes to church, wherever you're going, and listen to something that's going to make you more money. If you're a salesperson, you probably want to listen to sales and persuasion. You do that for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years. It's almost impossible not to be really successful in sales or whatever you want to do.
I think standing out from the crowd really does come down to what self-education looks like.
Yeah.
And then at some point you do have to hire experts.
Yeah, sure.
Like you've got to get with the, books unfortunately don't talk back.
Yeah.
And so it's
You
just like,
can't
I got to
retain
get with
books.
someone that actually can review my performance,
Yeah.
critique it,
Yeah.
give me constructive criticism,
Yeah.
and massively improve it.
You ever master anything? I mean, tell me a book you can't master anything. You know why you can't master this? Because I was telling Carson there. Give me an example. What's one of your favorite songs? Like if I said, hey, what's your favorite song? What would it be?
I love Imagine Dragons, so whatever's hot right now.
Yeah, I saw that thing when I walked in. So is there a song that you could probably sing it almost verbatim? You know the lyrics?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you memorized that. What's your favorite book? Just give me a favorite book.
How to Win Friends, Influence
Okay.
People.
Can you recite one page on that book?
I can't.
Do you know why? Because when you listen to music, your brain retains it because of the tonality and the melody. It's addicting. It's actually like a drug. So your brain starts to retain that. In a book, there's no tonality. There's no melodies. You can't memorize words. You read this book within 30 days, you retain less than 3% of what
All you can do is
read.
pick up some principles.
And it's just principles, right? Now, there's some good stuff in here. Is it going to triple your sales? No, because you got to learn advanced tonality. You got to learn how to use your body language. You got to understand, like, there's all these different nuances. Like a prospect, you might use a technique that we trained you, but what if they say this rather than how you thought it would go? You have to know how to rebound and pivot and then re-loop back around. So you got to know the ins and outs and be able to like retain it. You got to listen to like training every day. You got to hear it and then be able to role play with people who actually know what they're doing to train you. That's how you master stuff.
So you get to the end of your life and your kids are growing up and they're looking at dad and kind of asking, what was dad's legacy? How does this factor into that?
To me, it's about, I thought about that. It's about the people that we've helped. I know that sounds cliche. It sounds kind of weird.
No, it's okay if it's real,
to
right?
me, it's about like I get up every day, and like even my team will be like, "Hey, you're doing too many lives in the Facebook group. Like you're doing it 2 or 3 times a week. Like we don't need you to do that anymore." I'm like, "No, I really want to help these people. Like I actually like doing it. So I'll prepare training on buy board and go live. And we've got some Facebooks where there's tens of thousands of people in there, 100,000 that aren't even clients, right? But I'll still go live in there just to help them have something, To me, that's, I've got to look God in the face one day and like give an accounting. And God knows I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. So I'm hoping that by helping a lot of people, I can kind of like, hey, I've done a lot of good things. I've made some mistakes, but maybe that will give me a little bit of persuasion with God so I can go to a good place.
Go to a good place.
Yeah.
Go to a good place, brother.
We're all trying to figure out where we're going. We all know about this much of what's ahead of us, which is fascinating to me. I love studying, things about that. So it's cool.
Jeremy Lee Minor, you can find him on Instagram. You can DM if you want to learn more about his company. You can pick up his book, The New Model of Selling to an Unsellable Generation. Brother, thank you so much for sharing your life wisdom with us here on The Kris Krohn Show.